Now that you are stepping into this course, you need a clear reason to care about TOGAF 10 beyond certification and theory. In real projects, you are not judged by how well you can recite a framework. You are judged by whether you can reduce delivery risk, improve decision quality, and align investment with strategy. TOGAF 10 matters because it reinforces enterprise architecture as a leadership capability, not a documentation exercise. It helps you create clarity when there is confusion, set direction when teams are moving in different ways, and establish governance that enables speed rather than blocking it. Your organization is dealing with constant change, such as cloud transformation, security pressures, compliance expectations, and platform modernization. And you need a structured way to guide choices without turning architecture into bureaucracy. TOGAF 10 is designed to be more usable, more modular, and more aligned to what modern enterprises actually do, which is why understanding what change is a direct advantage in your day-to-day work. Building on why TOGAF 10 matters to you, it helps to reset what you should think of when you hear the term TOGAF. In practice, TOGAF 10 is not a single rigid method that you force on every program. It is a body of knowledge that gives you reusable guidance for running architecture, like a disciplined practice across the organization. It helps you create a repeatable way to define architecture direction, align stakeholders, and govern delivery outcomes. When you use TOGAF well, you are not producing more architecture. You are enabling better decisions with the right level of detail at the right time. You are shaping investment choices, influencing product and platform direction, and setting guardrails that keep delivery aligned to business goals and risk appetite. TOGAF 10 also respects that enterprises do not operate in a neat linear sequence. So it supports different ways to consume the guidance depending on whether you are doing a transformation, building a new platform, or fixing fragmentation across portfolios. With that practical framing in mind, the first major change you need to understand is that TOGAF 10 has been reorganized to be easier to consume and apply. Earlier versions often felt like a single heavy reference, where the method and the guidance were bundled together in a way that made it difficult to tailor. TOGAF 10 shifts toward a modular structure, which matters because in real organizations you rarely need everything at once. You might need governance guidance urgently, but only a lightweight architecture development cycle. You might need content guidance for what to produce, but also need to align to digital product operating models. The modular approach makes it easier for you to adopt a TOGAF as a practical toolkit, selecting the guidance that supports your current problem without dragging the entire framework into every conversation. This is also a leadership-friendly improvement because it helps you explain to executives and delivery leaders what parts you are applying and why, without sounding like you are forcing a framework rollout. Now that you see the modularship, you should understand how TOGAF 10 is organized so you can talk about it confidently with peers and leaders. TOGAF 10 splits into TOGAF fundamental content and TOGAF series guides. The fundamental content includes the core concepts and the architecture development method that most organizations treat as the baseline. The series guides extend the guidance into areas that are often critical in modern enterprises, such as security, agile delivery alignment, digital architecture, and specific techniques for applying architecture in different contexts. This structure matters because it legitimizes what experienced architects already do. You take a stable backbone for governance and decision making, then you add targeted guidance based on the enterprise context. It also helps you build an internal architecture playbook in your organization where you can say, this is our baseline and these are the extensions we use for our environment. That creates consistency without forcing uniformity. With the structure clear, it is equally important to know what did not change, because leaders often fear that adopting something new means destabilizing current practices. The core promise of TOGAF remains the same. It gives you a way to turn strategy into an actionable, governable architecture roadmap. It is still about aligning business outcomes with architecture decisions, managing change in a controlled way, and ensuring the organization does not drift into chaos through uncontrolled technology choices. The architecture development method still gives you a life cycle for moving from vision to target states to implementation governance. The content approach still helps you define what good architecture outputs look like. The governance emphasis still positions you as accountable for architectural direction and compliance, not as a person who simply publishes diagrams. So, when you talk to stakeholders, you can confidently say that TOGAF 10 modernizes how the guidance is packaged and consumed. But it does not remove the discipline that architecture leaders rely on. Now that you understand what stayed consistent, you can interpret what changed through the lens that matters in real projects. Usability. Most enterprise architecture failures are not because the framework is wrong, but because it is too heavy, too slow, or too disconnected from delivery reality. TOGAF 10 aims to reduce those failure modes by making guidance easier to adopt incrementally. For you, that means you can apply the right parts of TOGAF to the right problem, and you can meet teams where they are. If a product group is moving fast, you can focus on decision points, guardrails, and governance rather than long documentation. If a compliance-sensitive program is under scrutiny, you can strengthen traceability, accountability, and architecture assurance. TOGAF 10 supports this kind of selective application without making you feel like you are breaking the framework. With usability in mind, the most valuable impact of TOGAF 10 is how it improves your leadership posture in strategy to execution discussions. You often sit between executives who talk in outcomes and delivery teams who talk in backlogs and technical constraints. TOGAF 10 strengthens your ability to translate strategy into architecture decisions that delivery can actually implement. You can define a target architecture that is not a fantasy because it is tied to capability needs, risk appetite, and sequencing constraints. You can show how a roadmap is not just a list of projects, but a structured transition from current state fragmentation to target state coherence. You can explain trade-offs in language leaders respect, such as cost of delay, operational risk, resilience, vendor dependency, and organizational readiness. This is where TOGAF becomes a leadership tool because you are not just describing a future state. You are enabling decisions about what to fund, what to stop, and what must be governed tightly. Now that you see how TOGAF supports leadership conversations, imagine you are leading architecture for a platform modernization program across a large enterprise. Different teams want different tools, different cloud services, and different integration patterns, and every choice seems urgent. Without a strong architecture approach, the program turns into a collection of local optimizations and inconsistent patterns that increase operational burden. With TOGAF 10 thinking, you frame the architecture vision around business outcomes, such as faster product release cycles, improved resilience, and better security posture. You then guide decisions about standard platforms, integration approaches, and shared services as part of a target architecture and roadmap. You create governance that is focused on key decision points, such as identity and access, data integration, and operational monitoring, rather than governance over every minor change. The result is that delivery speed improves because teams are not re-arguing foundational choices every week, and leaders can see traceability from investment to outcomes. With that program example in mind, governance is where TOGAF 10 becomes extremely practical for you as an enterprise architect. Governance is not about saying no. It is about making decisions visible, consistent, and aligned to enterprise risk and strategy. TOGAF 10 reinforces governance as an architecture capability that must exist alongside delivery, not after delivery. You can use TOGAF aligned governance to clarify who owns architectural decisions, who approves exceptions, and how you measure compliance without creating fear in delivery teams. Accountability becomes clearer when you define architecture principles, set guardrails, and establish a lightweight architecture review process that focuses on outcomes such as security alignment, operational readiness, and integration consistency. This is critical in real projects because when incidents happen, leaders ask who approved the risky design choice and why. TOGAF 10 helps you build governance that can answer that question with confidence and evidence. Now that governance is clear, you should understand why TOGAF 10 is often seen as more compatible with modern product and platform operating models. Many organizations deliver through persistent product teams, platform teams, and incremental roadmaps rather than big one-time programs. In that world, architecture has to be continuous, and it has to operate through guardrails and decision frameworks rather than heavy stage gates. TOGAF 10 supports this by letting you treat the architecture development method as a flexible cycle that you can run at different levels of depth. You can do a fast architecture, vision, and target direction for a product group, then deepen the architecture detail when the change becomes more complex or risky. You can keep architecture current through change management rather than rewriting everything every year. This allows you to stay relevant because your architecture practice becomes a living function that guides delivery, not a periodic documentation event. With that alignment to modern delivery understood, you can now look at the architecture development method in the way it was always meant to be used, as a leadership cycle for managing change. The architecture development method is not a checklist that forces you to produce outputs for the sake of outputs. It is a way to ensure you have clarity on vision, target states, transition plans, and governance. As a leader, you use it to structure discussions, identify decision points, and ensure stakeholders understand the implications of choices. You focus on what must be decided, what must be standardized, what can be flexible, and what risks require explicit acceptance. This helps you operate calmly in complex programs where everyone is moving fast because you are consistently guiding the organization back to a disciplined set of architecture questions. What outcome are we delivering? What target state are we moving toward? And what governance ensures we do not drip? Now that you have the right posture for the method, the most important mindset shift you should take from TOGAF 10 is that your real output is decisions, not documents. Documents are evidence, not the outcome. The outcome is clarity, alignment, and controlled execution. When your architecture practice is decision-centric, you reduce waste because you do not overproduce artifacts that no one uses. You also increase trust because delivery teams see that you are helping them move faster through clear guardrails, reusable patterns, and resolve trade-offs. Executives trust you more because you can explain what decisions were made, why they were made, and how they support strategy and risk posture. This is exactly why TOGAF 10 matters. It encourages consumption and application of guidance in a way that supports decision-making and accountability. Building on decision-centric architecture, real enterprise architecture work is often stakeholder management disguised as technical debate. You deal with conflicts between speed and control, cost and resilience, standardization and autonomy, vendor simplicity and vendor lock-in. TOGAF 10 helps you structure these conflicts into explicit trade-offs that leaders can understand and decide on. You can use architecture principles and governance to keep discussions from becoming personal or political because you anchor choices to agreed outcomes and constraints. You also reduce friction by defining what is non-negotiable, such as security controls or integration standards, and what is flexible, such as user interface technology or team-level tooling. This is how you protect the enterprise without crushing innovation. In real projects, this is one of your highest value contributions because unresolved trade-offs become delivery delays, cost overruns, and operational incidents. Now that you see how TOGAF supports trade-offs, consider a merger integration scenario where two organizations have overlapping applications, inconsistent data definitions, and competing platforms. Without disciplined architecture, the combined enterprise often ends up running duplicate systems for years, increasing cost and complexity. Using TOGAF 10 principles, you can establish a shared architecture vision that aligns leaders on what the combined organization is trying to achieve, such as unified customer experience, shared operational reporting, and reduced technology duplication. You can guide a target architecture that defines which platforms become strategic and which are retired, while also creating a roadmap that sequences migration to reduce business disruption. Governance becomes essential because every business unit will lobby to keep their preferred systems. TOGAF 10 helps you create a transparent decision model so leaders can make accountable choices that serve the enterprise, not local preferences. With these examples in mind, you should also set realistic expectations so you do not misuse the framework. TOGAF 10 does not replace your judgment, and it does not automatically make architecture effective. If you apply it rigidly, it can still become heavy. If you apply it without stakeholder engagement, it can still become ignored. The value comes from how you tailor it to your enterprise context and how you use it to build trust. You choose the depth of architecture effort based on risk, complexity, and organizational maturity. You keep outputs tight and decision driven. You use governance to enable, not control, for the sake of control. This is why your leadership skill matters, because TOGAF 10 provides structure, but you provide discernment and influence. Now that you have the right expectations, the final practical question is how you should position TOGAF 10 so it gains adoption without creating resistance. You position it as a shared language and operating model for architecture decisions, not as a compliance requirement for documentation. You show leaders that it reduces risk, improves investment decisions, and increases delivery predictability. You show delivery teams that it reduces confusion, provides reusable patterns, and speeds up alignment. You introduce it incrementally by applying it to a real problem that matters, such as a platform program, a cloud security uplift, or a portfolio rationalization effort. When people see that TOGAF 10 helps them make faster and better decisions, it becomes a practical tool rather than a theoretical framework. Let's now discuss the key takeaways from what you learned so far so you can apply it immediately. You learned that TOGAF 10 matters because it strengthens enterprise architecture as a leadership discipline focused on outcomes, decision quality, governance, and accountability. You saw that TOGAF 10 is more modular, making it easier to consume and tailor in real-world environments without dragging unnecessary complexity into every program. You understood the split between TOGAF fundamental content and the TOGAF series guides, which allows you to establish a stable baseline and then extend based on enterprise needs. You explored how TOGAF supports strategy to execution alignment by helping you create target architecture direction, roadmaps, and governance that enable delivery speed while controlling risk. You also learned the most practical mindset shift. Architecture success is measured by decisions and outcomes, while documents are simply supporting evidence. Now that you have a clear understanding of what changed in TOGAF 10 and why it matters in real projects, you are ready to use this knowledge to elevate how you lead architecture conversations in your organization. Subscribe to the channel Like this video, share it with your architecture and delivery peers, and comment with your role and the biggest challenge you face in making architecture practical in your workplace.